The egg cracked open under a red sky, and nobody in the crowd noticed, because on Dracos, hundreds of eggs cracked open on the same day, every year at the same hour. It was tradition older than memory. The dragons called it the bonding rite, the day when baby dragons, called hatchlings, would walk on shaky legs across a wide stone field and pick an older dragon to bond with for life. That bond gave the hatchling strength, wisdom, and the fighting skill of the older dragon. It had worked this way for 10,000 years. Nobody thought it could ever go wrong. Dana was not there to watch dragons hatch. She was there to fix a broken translator device near the ceremonial field. She worked for the small human outpost on Dracos, a base built to keep peace and trade between humans and dragons. Dana was not important. She was not a soldier or a diplomat. She was just an engineer with grease on her hands and a toolkit on her back, trying to get a stubborn machine working before the ceremony started making noise that would drown out her radio. She knelt beside the broken device, ignoring the roar of thousands of dragons gathering around the field. The ground shook under so much weight. Steam rose from dragon nostrils into the cold morning air. Dana barely looked up. She had seen dragons before. They did not scare her anymore. Among the hatchlings crossing the field that day was a small one named Rel. Rel was smaller than the others, with uneven wings and a nervous walk. While other hatchlings moved straight towards strong, proud dragons waiting to be chosen, Rel wandered off course, confused by the noise, the smell of smoke, and the shouting of the crowd. Panic rose in the small creature's chest. Too many bodies, too much sound, too much heat. Rel ran. Not toward a dragon, away from all of them. The hatchling's tiny claws scraped across the stone until it reached the edge of the field, where the noise was a little less crushing. And there, kneeling with a wrench in her hand, was Dana. Rel stopped. Something about the human was different. She was still. She was calm. She was not roaring or posturing or trying to look powerful. She was just quiet. Before Dana even noticed the hatchling was there, Rel pressed its small head against her arm. A bright light passed between them, warm and sudden, like a spark jumping between two wires. Dana gasped and dropped her wrench. Her whole body felt like it had been touched by lightning, but it did not hurt. It felt like something opening inside her chest that she did not know was closed. The field went silent. Every dragon turned. An elder dragon named Korvath, one of the oldest and most respected in the clan, stormed across the field with his wings half spread in alarm. "What is this?" he roared, his voice shaking the ground. "This cannot be. A hatchling does not bond with a beast that cannot fly. It does not bond with a creature with no scales, no fire, no claws worth speaking of." Dana stood frozen, her hand still resting where Rel had touched her. She did not understand what had just happened, only that something inside her felt tied to the small trembling creature at her feet. "I did not do anything," Dana said, her voice small against the growing crowd of angry, confused dragons. "I was just fixing my equipment." "The bond does not lie," said another voice, older and quieter than Korvath's. It came from a robed dragon elder, one of the keepers of ancient lore. "Whether we like it or not, whether it has ever happened before or not, the bond has chosen. This hatchling and this human are connected now." Korvath's eyes narrowed. He turned to the little hatchling who was pressed close against Dana's leg, refusing to move. "Rel," he said, using the name given to the hatchling at birth, "return to the field. Choose again, choose properly." Rel did not move. Korvath took a step closer, his massive shadow falling over both of them. "This is not a request." Still, Rel did not move. Instead, the hatchling let out a small, defiant chirp and curled tighter against Dana's side, as if daring anyone to try and pull her away. Dana felt her heart pounding. She had no experience with dragon customs. She did not know the rules, the traditions, the punishments for breaking them. All she knew was that the small creature at her feet was shaking, scared, and somehow, impossibly, hers. "I don't know what this means," Dana said carefully, looking up at Korvath, "but I'm not going to push her away if she's scared." Korvath studied her for a long moment, his ancient eyes unreadable. Around them, the crowd of dragons murmured, some in anger, some in confusion, a few in quiet curiosity. No one in 10,000 years had seen a hatchling refuse the rite. No one had ever seen a bond form with someone outside the dragon race. Finally, Corvath spoke, his voice lower now, heavy with the weight of tradition being broken in front of him. Then this will be dealt with properly. The elders will decide what must be done. Until then, his gaze moved to Rel, still pressed against Dana's leg. The bond will be watched. He turned and walked away, his tail dragging across the stone. Dana looked down at Rel, who finally looked up at her with wide, uncertain eyes. Neither of them understood what had just happened. Neither of them knew what it would mean for the days ahead. But somewhere deep inside both of them, the same thought was forming. Whatever this was, it was not a mistake. Word of the strange bond spread across Dracos faster than fire through dry grass. By the next morning, every clan on the continent had heard some version of the story, and every version made it sound stranger than the last. Some said the human girl had used a trick to steal a hatchling. Others said the gods themselves had sent a warning. Dana heard none of these rumors directly, because she spent that whole night locked in a stone chamber with a council of dragon elders, trying to explain something she did not understand herself. The elders decided to try something first. They would break the bond. They led Dana and Rel to a wide chamber carved into the mountain, lit by torches that made shadows dance on the walls. An old ritual, one used only a handful of times in dragon history for bonds gone wrong, was prepared. Dana was told to stand on one side of a stone circle. Rel was pulled gently but firmly to the other side. The moment the distance between them grew too wide, both of them screamed. Dana's whole body felt like it was being pulled apart from the inside. Her vision blurred, her knees buckled. Across the circle, Rel shrieked in pain, thrashing against the dragon holding her back, small wings flapping in panic. "Stop," Dana gasped, barely able to breathe. "Please stop." The elders released them at once, and the moment Rel scrambled back into Dana's arms, the pain vanished as quickly as it came. Dana held the shaking hatchling close, her hands trembling, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. Corvath, who had watched the whole ritual in silence, finally spoke. "The bond is real," he said, his voice quieter than before. "Whatever this is, it cannot be undone by force." That single sentence changed everything. Overnight, Dana went from being an unimportant engineer fixing broken machines to being the center of a problem that dragon scholars and human diplomats alike did not know how to solve. Old texts were pulled from dusty shelves, some so old their pages crumbled at the touch. Scholars searched for any mention of a bond outside dragonkind, anything that might explain what had happened on the field. Most of what they found were myths, stories told to hatchlings at night, never meant to be taken seriously. Dana was given a small room near the outpost, close enough that dragon guards could watch her, but far enough that she still felt like a stranger in a world she barely understood. Rel would not leave her side, not even to sleep. The hatchling curled up at the foot of Dana's bed every night, and if Dana so much as shifted position, one small eye would crack open to check she was still there. It was during those quiet nights that Dana began to understand something the elders had missed. Rel was not like the other hatchlings. Dragon bonds, from what Dana had read in the translated texts given to her, usually shaped a hatchling to become like its mentor. A hatchling bonded to a warrior grew fierce and bold. A hatchling bonded to a hunter grew sharp-eyed and quick. But Rel was bonded to an engineer, someone who solved problems with patience instead of force, who fixed things by understanding them instead of breaking them. Dana noticed it first in small ways. When a storage crate outside her room got stuck, Rel did not try to smash it open with her claws the way a young dragon usually would. Instead, the hatchling tilted her head, studied the latch, and nudged it with her nose until it clicked open. When a loud noise startled the other hatchlings into fleeing, Rel instead crept closer, curious, trying to understand where the sound came from. Not everyone found this charming. A rival clan leader named Sten watched the whole situation unfold with great interest, though not the kind that came from curiosity. Sten had long wanted more influence over Corvath's clan, and this strange, unwanted bond gave him the perfect opportunity. He began speaking quietly to other elders, planting doubts, reminding them of old laws, suggesting that allowing a human to raise a dragon was an insult to every bonded pair who had come before. A hatchling raised by a soft, clawless creature will grow soft and clawless herself, Sten said during one gathering, loud enough for others to hear, but careful never to say it directly to Dana or Korvath. Is this truly what we want representing our clan? Korvath said nothing in these meetings, but Dana could tell the words were reaching him. She saw it in the way his eyes lingered on Rel during their supervised visits, studying the hatchling for any sign of weakness, any proof that Sten might be right. Dana refused to let that happen. She began spending every free hour teaching Rel the only way she knew how, not with roars or displays of strength, but with patience, questions, and small challenges. She showed Rel how gears worked, how a simple lever could move something far heavier than a hatchling's whole body. She let Rel watch her repair machines, explaining each step slowly, and was quietly amazed at how quickly the small dragon began to understand. Rel was not becoming soft. She was becoming something new. And somewhere deep in the mountain halls of Drakos, as whispers of doubt continued to spread, Dana made a quiet promise to herself. Whatever the elders decided, whatever Sten tried to do, she would not let anyone convince her or Rel that this bond was a mistake. Rain fell over the training grounds of Drakos for 3 straight days, turning the packed dirt into thick mud that clung to every claw and boot. Most hatchlings hated this weather. It made flying harder, made the ground slippery, made everything smell like wet stone. Rel loved it. She loved watching how water moved, how it found the lowest path without anyone teaching it to, how it could wear down solid rock if given enough time. Dana had once told her that patience could do more than strength, and the rain seemed to prove her right. By now 3 months had passed since the day on the ceremonial field. Rel had grown, though not in the way most hatchlings grew. She was still smaller than dragons her age, her wings still a little uneven, but her mind moved faster than anyone expected. While other hatchlings spent their training sessions learning to roar to posture, to strike with claws and tail, Rel spent hers watching, asking questions, and figuring out clever ways around problems instead of forcing her way through them. This difference did not go unnoticed. During one training session, a group of young hatchlings was set a challenge by their mentors: retrieve a heavy stone marker from the far side of a ravine without flying over it, since their wings were not yet strong enough for long crossings. Most of the hatchlings tried to push through the mud at the bottom of the ravine, straining and slipping, using brute strength to drag themselves forward. Rel did not go into the ravine at all. Instead, she studied the old rope bridge nearby, one nobody used because it was too worn down for a full-grown dragon's weight. She was small enough to cross it safely. While the others were still stuck knee-deep in mud, Rel crossed the bridge, grabbed the stone marker, and carried it back before anyone else had even reached the halfway point. The mentors watching were stunned into silence. One of the older hatchlings, annoyed at being beaten by the smallest one in the group, sneered and said Rel had cheated by not following the same path as everyone else. But the training mentor, an old dragon named Fessa, shook her head slowly. There was no rule about which path to take, Fessa said, studying Rel with new interest. Only a rule about the goal. This hatchling reached it first, and reached it without exhausting herself in the mud. Word of the incident reached Korvath by evening, carried by whispers among the training staff. He said nothing about it directly, but Dana noticed a change in him during their next supervised meeting. He watched Rel longer than usual, his expression harder to read. That night, back in the small room near the outpost, Dana sat cross-legged on the floor while Rel curled beside her, exhausted but pleased with herself. "You did good today," Dana said, running a hand along the hatchling's uneven wing, but some of the others were angry about it. Rel made a low, questioning sound, tilting her head. "They're used to solving problems one way," Dana explained. "Strength first. You solved it a different way, and that made some of them feel like the rules don't matter anymore. But they do matter. You just found a smarter way to follow them." It was not long after that a real test of this idea came, one far more serious than a training exercise. During a routine flight lesson near the northern cliffs, a sudden storm rolled in without warning, catching a group of young hatchlings midair. Wind slammed into fragile wings, and one hatchling, panicking, spiraled toward the rocks below. The mentors overseeing the lesson were too far away to reach him in time. Rel, who had been grounded that day due to a minor wing injury, saw the whole thing happen from a ledge below. She did not have the strength to fly out and catch him. She was too small, too injured, and dragons far stronger than her were already struggling against the wind. But she remembered something Dana had shown her days earlier, while fixing a broken pulley system at the outpost. How wind moving through a narrow gap could be redirected, made weaker, if it hit something solid at the right angle first. Rel scrambled along the cliffside to a narrow rock formation she had noticed before, one that funneled wind strangely when storms came through. She threw herself against a loose section of stone, using her small body as a lever the way Dana had taught her with tools, and knocked it free. The falling rock disrupted the wind pattern just enough, just for a moment, to slow the worst of the gust, battering the falling hatchling. It gave the mentors the extra second they needed to catch him safely. Nobody who saw it fully understood what Rel had done, only that somehow, impossibly, she had changed the wind at exactly the right moment. When Korvath heard the story that evening, he said nothing at first. He simply flew, alone, to the outpost where Dana and Rel were staying, landing heavily outside the small building. Dana stepped outside cautiously, unsure what to expect. She should not have been able to do that, Korvath said, his voice quieter than Dana had ever heard it. No hatchling her age understands wind patterns. No dragon her size should have thought to use stone that way. She didn't learn it from a dragon, Dana said carefully. She learned it from watching me work. Korvath was silent for a long moment, staring past Dana at the small hatchling curled up just inside the doorway, watching him with tired but steady eyes. Perhaps, he said finally, there is more than one kind of strength worth having. He left without saying anything else, but Dana knew somehow that something between them had shifted. Not fully, not completely, but enough. Somewhere far away, in the halls of a rival clan, Sten heard the same story and felt his plans grow more urgent. If Korvath's doubt was weakening, he would need a stronger move to stop this bond from being accepted. And he already knew exactly what that move would be. The great horn of Drakos sounded at dawn, a deep note that rolled across the mountains and valleys, calling every clan leader to gather at the council ring. Dana had never heard the horn used before, and the sound of it, low and heavy, made her stomach tighten with worry before she even knew why it had been called. Rel heard it too, and pressed close against Dana's side as they made their way toward the gathering, guided by two silent dragon guards. The council ring was a massive open space carved into the mountainside, surrounded by stone seats where clan leaders from across the region sat waiting. Dana had never seen so many dragons in one place outside the bonding rite itself. She felt small and out of place among them, her human size nothing compared to the towering forms around her. Sten stood at the center of the ring, waiting for the horn's echo to fade before he spoke. Every year, he began, his voice carrying easily across the open space. Our clans send their strongest bonded pairs to compete in the trial of wings. It is how we prove which bonds are strong enough to lead, to protect, to represent our people. It is tradition older than any of us. He paused, letting his words settle before continuing. This year, a new bond has formed, one that breaks every tradition we know. Some among us, his eyes flicked briefly toward Korvath, believe this bond should be allowed to stand without challenge. I disagree. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I propose, Sten continued, that if this bond between hatchling and human is truly as strong as some claim, then let it prove itself the same way every other bond must. Let the hatchling and her human enter the trial of wings, alongside pairs who have trained together their entire lives. If the bond is real, it will survive. If it is not, he let the sentence hang unfinished, but the meaning was clear to everyone listening. Dana's chest tightened. She barely understood the customs of Drakos, let alone the dangers of something called the Trial of Wings. She looked toward Korvath, hopping for some sign of support, but the old dragon's expression remained carefully unreadable. This is unfair, Dana said, stepping forward despite the fear rising in her throat. Rel is still young. The other pairs have trained for years, decades even. This isn't a fair test, it's a setup to fail. Sten's eyes narrowed slightly, though his voice stayed calm. Then, withdraw. Admit the bond is not strong enough to be recognized, and this matter will end quietly. The ring fell silent, waiting. Dana glanced down at Rel, who stood firm despite her small size, wings slightly spread, refusing to back down even though she could not fully understand every word being spoken. Something in that small, stubborn posture reminded Dana why she had refused to give up on this bond in the first place. "We accept," Dana said, before she could stop herself. Gasps spread through the crowd. Even Korvath's eyes widened slightly. Sten smiled, the kind of smile that showed he had expected exactly this answer. "Then it is settled. The trial begins in 10 days. The walk back to the outpost that evening was heavy with silence. Dana's hands would not stop shaking, not from fear of the dragons around her, but from the weight of what she had just agreed to. 10 days to prepare Rel for a competition built for dragons who had trained together for years. That night, doubt crept into Dana's mind in a way it never had before. She sat outside under the twin moons of Drakos, staring at nothing, while Rel watched her quietly from a few steps away. "I don't know if I can teach you what you need to survive this," Dana admitted quietly. "You deserved a real mentor, someone who could show you how to fight, how to fly properly, how to do everything a dragon is supposed to do. Instead, you got me, an engineer who barely understands your world." Rel moved closer, pressing her small head against Dana's arm the same way she had on the day they first bonded. A soft, low sound came from her throat, one Dana had learned over the months meant reassurance rather than fear. "You're not sorry," Dana said quietly, almost laughing despite herself. "You're stubborn, you've always been stubborn." Rel chirped, in what could only be agreement. Dana wrapped an arm around the hatchling, staring up at the moons. "All right," she said finally. "If we're doing this, we're not doing it their way. We're not trying to outfight dragons who have had years to master fighting. We're going to do what we've always done. We're going to think differently." Over the following days, Dana and Rel trained in secret, away from watching eyes, using methods no dragon pair had ever used before. Dana taught Rel to read terrain the way an engineer reads a blueprint, to notice weaknesses in structures, patterns in wind, timing in movement. Rel, in turn, began teaching Dana small things about dragon instinct, about sensing danger before it was visible, about trusting sudden feelings that came without explanation. It was not traditional. It was not what any dragon pair had ever done before. But slowly, piece by piece, something new began to take shape between them, something built not from centuries of dragon tradition, but from the strange, unexpected bond between a small hatchling and a human girl who refused to give up on her. On the 9th night, as the trial approached, Dana looked at Rel and asked the question that had been sitting heavy in her chest since the council ring. "Are you scared?" Rel considered the question for a long moment before answering with a slow, steady nod. "Me too," Dana admitted, "but we're doing this together, whatever happens." Somewhere in the darkness beyond the outpost, Sten watched from a distant ridge, confident that tradition would win, unaware that tradition was about to meet something it had never faced before. Thousands of dragons filled the stone stands surrounding the trial grounds, their voices blending into a low roar that shook the air itself. Banners from every major clan hung from the cliffs above, snapping in the wind. Dana had never felt so small in her life, standing at the edge of the arena floor with Rel pressed close beside her, both of them staring out at a battlefield built for creatures far larger and far more experienced than either of them. The Trial of Wings was not a single contest. It was three, each testing something different: strength, speed, and trust between bonded pairs. 6 pairs competed that year, most of them dragons bonded to dragons who had trained together since hatching. Dana and Rel were the 7th, an addition nobody had truly expected to survive the first round, let alone finish it. The first trial began with a horn blast that echoed across the arena. Massive stone pillars rose from the ground, forming a shifting maze that changed shape as hidden mechanisms ground and turned beneath the arena floor. The goal was simple: reach the center marker before the maze sealed shut. The challenge was that most competitors relied on raw strength, smashing through weaker stone walls to force a path forward. Rel did not smash anything. While other pairs threw themselves against crumbling stone, wasting strength and time, Dana studied the pattern of the shifting walls from where she stood, counting the rhythm of the grinding mechanisms beneath the ground. She had spent years working with machines. Patterns like this were not so different from broken engines she had repaired 100 times before. "There," she said, pointing toward a gap that would only open for a few seconds before sealing again. "Now go." Rel moved instantly, trusting the human's judgment completely. She darted through the narrow gap seconds before it closed, weaving through the maze using the pattern Dana had mapped out loud as they moved, calling directions over the noise of crashing stone around them. While the other pairs were still fighting their way through walls with brute force, Rel reached the center marker first, breathless but unharmed. The crowd fell into stunned silence, followed by a wave of murmurs that spread across the stands. Nobody had expected the smallest, strangest pair in the trial to win the first round. Korvath, seated among the elder judges, said nothing, but his eyes never left Rel as she returned to Dana's side, chest heaving with excitement rather than exhaustion. The second trial tested speed, a straightforward race through the sky above jagged cliffs, but Rel's wings were still smaller and less developed than the older hatchlings competing against her. She fell behind quickly, unable to match their raw speed no matter how hard she pushed herself. Dana, watching from the ground station, remembered something Rel had shown her weeks earlier about how certain wind patterns moved along the cliffside during specific times of day. She shouted directions up through the communication device strapped to her wrist, guiding Rel toward a narrow air current most flyers avoided because it was considered unpredictable. Rel trusted her without hesitation. The current carried her forward in a sudden burst, cutting through the field and pulling her back into contention just as the race reached its final stretch. She did not win the second trial outright, finishing third, but it was enough to keep them firmly in the competition, far ahead of where anyone expected them to be. By the time the third and final trial began, tension in the crowd had shifted into something closer to genuine excitement. The final test was the most dangerous, a combined challenge of strength and trust, where each pair had to cross a series of unstable platforms suspended above a deep ravine, using teamwork to support each other's weight where the structures were too weak to hold alone. Halfway through the trial, disaster struck. A support beam beneath one of the platforms cracked loudly, sending a wave of panic through the crowd as an entire section of the course began to collapse. A young dragon competing in a rival pair lost his footing, tumbling toward the platform's edge as his own bonded partner, too far away, screamed in helpless panic. Every experienced pair on the course froze, unsure how to respond to a collapse none of them had trained for. Years of tradition had taught them to rely on raw strength and speed, but nothing about this sudden structural failure could be solved with either. Dana reacted instantly. She had studied the platform design before the trial began, noticing weak points in the structure that reminded her of similar failures in outpost equipment. She shouted directions to Rel, who was closest to the falling dragon. "The support beam to your left, hit it exactly where it meets the platform. It'll redirect the collapse away from him." Rel did not hesitate. She threw her whole body against the weak point Dana had identified, using the same trick of leverage she had learned months earlier fixing broken machines back at the outpost. The beam snapped cleanly, redirecting the collapsing section just enough to slow the fall and give the panicked young dragon time to catch a nearby ledge. Silence swept through the arena as the danger passed. Then slowly, the crowd began to roar, not in anger this time, but in stunned approval. What Rel had done was not something taught in any traditional dragon training. It was something entirely new, born from a bond nobody had believed could work. As the dust settled and officials rushed to check on the injured pair, Whispers spread quickly through the stands about how Sten had pushed so hard for this competition, confident it would expose the human-dragon bond as weak. Instead, it had done the opposite. Korvath rose from his seat among the judges, his voice carrying across the now quiet arena. "Whatever this bond is," he said, loud enough for every clan to hear, "it has just saved a life that pure tradition could not." Sten's face, visible among the gathered elders, tightened with barely hidden anger. His plan had backfired completely, and there was no way left to deny what everyone in the arena had just witnessed. Dana knelt beside Rel as officials moved to help the injured competitors, both of them breathing hard, hearts still racing from the chaos. "You did that," Dana said softly, resting a hand against Rel's side. Rel shook her head slowly, nudging Dana's hand with her nose. "We did that." Snow had begun to fall over Dracos by the time the elders gathered again at the council ring, softer and quieter than the roaring crowds of the trial weeks earlier. This meeting was not called by horn or ceremony. It was called simply because it needed to happen, and everyone who mattered already knew what the outcome would be before a single word was spoken. Dana stood at the center of the ring once more, Rel beside her, no longer small and unsteady but visibly stronger, more confident, her once uneven wings now holding a graceful shape earned through months of training that no traditional hatchling had ever experienced. The whispers that once followed them everywhere had changed too, no longer filled with doubt, but with quiet curiosity and, in some cases, something close to respect. Korvath rose slowly from his place among the elders, his old joints creaking with the weight of years, though his voice remained steady and clear. "For 10,000 years," he began, "we believed the bonding rite could only exist between dragon and dragon. We believed strength came only from claws, fire, and wings passed down through tradition. What happened on that field months ago broke every rule we thought we understood." He paused, his gaze settling on Rel. "And yet, in the trial of wings, this bond saved a life that tradition alone could not." Murmurs spread through the gathered elders, though none of them carried the anger that once filled these meetings. "I was wrong to fear what I did not understand," Korvath continued. "This bond is not a mistake, nor a flaw in our ancient ways. It is something new, something none of us have seen before, and perhaps something we were never meant to fully control." He turned to formally address the council, his voice rising with authority. "Let it be recorded, from this day forward, that the bond between Hatchling Rel and the human known as Dana is recognized, fully and without condition, as legitimate under the laws of Dracos." The ring erupted into a mixture of applause, wing beats against stone, and low, approving roars that echoed across the mountains. Even some who had once doubted the bond joined in, their curiosity now outweighing old prejudice. Sten, standing near the back of the gathered elders, said nothing. His plan to discredit the bond had failed completely, and with witnesses from every major clan present at the trial, there was no path left for him to challenge the decision without losing what little standing he had left. He turned quietly and left before the ceremony fully ended, his influence over the council weaker than it had been in years. Dana barely noticed him leave. Her attention was fully on Rel, who stood taller now, watching the reaction of the crowd with quiet, steady eyes, no longer the frightened hatchling who had once run from the noise of the bonding rite. That evening, after the council dispersed, and the snow continued falling gently over the mountains, Dana and Rel walked together to a quiet ridge overlooking the training grounds where their journey had truly begun. Below them, a new group of young hatchlings practiced simple exercises under the watchful eyes of their mentors, preparing for the day, years from now, when they would face their own bonding rite. Dana sat down on a flat stone, and Rel settled beside her, resting her head against Dana's shoulder in a way that had become familiar over the past months. "I never imagined this would happen," Dana admitted quietly, watching her breath form small clouds in the cold air. "I came here to fix broken machines, not to become part of dragon history." Rel made a soft, thoughtful sound, one Dana had learned meant agreement mixed with amusement. "You changed everything," Dana continued, smiling faintly. "Not just for me, for every hatchling who comes after you now. They'll grow up knowing the bond doesn't have to look one certain way. It can be anything as long as it's real. Rel lifted her head slightly, looking down at the training hatchlings below, then back at Dana, as if silently agreeing with every word. In the weeks that followed, stories of Rel and Dana spread far beyond the borders of Dracos, carried by traders, scholars, and travelers eager to understand what this new kind of bond truly meant. Some hatchlings, inspired by what they heard, began to wonder openly whether the bonding rite had to remain limited to dragonkind at all. A few elders, cautious but curious, began quietly studying old texts, once dismissed as myth, searching for other forgotten possibilities buried in Dracos history. Rel, for her part, showed no interest in becoming a symbol or a legend. She simply continued growing, continued learning, continued choosing the strange, clever, patient path that had defined her since the day she chose Dana over every dragon on that ceremonial field. Months later, as a new hatching season approached and hundreds of fresh eggs began to crack open across Dracos, Dana stood once more at the edge of the ceremonial field, this time not fixing broken equipment, but simply watching, with Rel resting beside her, now large enough to shield her from the wind. As nervous new hatchlings stumbled across the stone field, some choosing dragons quickly, others hesitating uncertainly, Dana noticed something different in the air this time. Fewer elders looked shocked when a hatchling paused near the small group of human observers stationed at the outpost's edge. A few even looked almost hopeful. Dana glanced down at Rel, who watched the new hatchlings with quiet interest of her own. Every hatchling was supposed to pick a dragon, Dana said softly, more to herself than to Rel. But maybe that was never really the rule. Maybe it was just the only option anyone thought existed. Rel let out a low, satisfied sound, nudging gently against Dana's side as the next generation of hatchlings began their own uncertain, unpredictable choices. No longer entirely certain, for the first time in 10,000 years, exactly what those choices might become.